Well, all right. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're busy. So we've entered the legal tampering period as of Tuesday. Teams get to submit offers to guys who will eventually sign once free agency gets underway. The Packers, they were able to make a little bit of a splash themselves. Nate Hobbs, cornerback from the Las Vegas Raiders, 4 years, 48 million. Aaron Banks, guard from the San Francisco 49ers, 4 years, 77 million. Just tell me what are your initial reactions to those two agreements.
Aaron Banks, no relation. I didn't think so. But that's cool that you've got such a great football background. But you're an anchor on the news side.
Yeah, yeah. Nice to be doing something a little bit different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great, good. We should do this more often.
absolutely.
All right. So I think first of all, if you were a Packers fan who was hoping for a big cannonball splash into the free agent pool, this wasn't it, right? It wasn't Josh Jacobs from last year. It wasn't Xavier McKinney from last year. But what it is are two signings that fit really clear needs for this team. They needed to upgrade their offensive line. If you're a Packers fan and you watched how things went in Philadelphia when Elton Jenkins went out of the game, you knew they needed help on the offensive line. They got it with the best guard on the market. And then in the cornerback group, they are not going to bring back Jair Alexander. It's just a matter of do they find a trade partner or not? And either way, they needed to add to that group. They're probably not going to bring back Eric Stokes, a former first round pick as well. So they needed corner help. And Hobbs is a big athletic corner who can play inside and outside. They seem like really good fits. Now we'll find out if they turn out to be really good players in green and gold.
Let's start with Aaron Banks. Since David Bakhtiari's injuries and eventually him leaving the team, it feels like there's been a revolving door across the offensive line. Elton Jenkins has been really the only consistent piece. They draft um, Jordan Morgan last year in the first round, but his season is cut short. How big of a building block is this for the Green Bay offense in general, along with Jordan Love as we head into these next 3, 4 years?
Well, you know this having played the game. I mean, the reality is that you have to build your offensive line and your defensive line. That's where it all starts. And if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, that's how they won the Super Bowl, right? They got pressure with four down linemen and they protected their quarterback much better than the Packers did in that playoff game. So the crazy thing about the Packers offensive line is Josh Myers, their starting center, is a free agent. We're not expecting him to be re-signed. And then three more guys are all going into their walk years of their contracts. Zach Tom at right tackle, Rasheed Walker at left tackle, and Sean Ryan at guard. And so they're in a really pivotal time where they have to figure out not only what is their line going to look like this year, but what's it going to look like down the road. And by signing Banks, they feel like they've got one guard spot locked up now for the next 3 to 4 years.
And now let's get to the other free agent signing, Nate Hobbs. He's been a little banged up, but again, you mentioned he's been a very solid starter out for the Raiders over the past several years. How much of you address some of the needs, Jair as well as Eric Stokes maybe not coming back, but how much of this is also a response to the rest of the NFC North? We see all the perimeter weapons that is across the division. Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, Amon-Ra St. Brown along with James Williams in Detroit, an up and comer with I'm blanking on his name, Roma Dunze, and then
Right?
DJ Moore over in Chicago. So yes, the Packers have their needs, but how much of this is a response to the division?
Yeah, well, they needed to add more wide receiver help. That could be an argument too, based on those other teams' lists at wide receiver. But look, this is I'm not going to say that this is Las Vegas East, but obviously Rich Bisaccia coached Hobbs. Keyshawn Nixon and Josh Jacobs played with Hobbs. They know what he's about. Look, he's physical, and that's one of the things that for Jair, he was even though he's not the biggest corner, he was so physical when he came into the league. And then he hurt his shoulder in 2021, and he's never been the same tackler, right? And look, I get it. It's his job to cover guys. But in this defense, you have to be able to be physical. Keyshawn Nixon, not the biggest guy, physical. Carrington Valentine, not the biggest guy, physical. Jeff Hafley needs his corners to tackle, to crack and replace. And That's not something that maybe Jair Alexander, even when he was healthy, was able to do. The beauty of Hobbs is that he can play inside, he can play outside, he's got versatility, he's got size, he's got physicality. Again, the injury question is a serious question. Can he stay healthy? That's why I think the Packers, in both these instances, structured their contracts that they're not on the hook for as long as the contracts are. These are contracts that basically after 2 years, if they want to get out, they can.
And with us being essentially in the second day of free agency now, you talk to anybody that follows the Packers or fans, the big things that they're talking about aren't necessarily these two signings, but can we add another pass rusher? Can we add another pass catcher? Some wide receivers on the market, a lot of them maybe on the tail ends of their career. DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, maybe even Cooper Kupp will eventually become available if the Rams don't find a trade partner. And then as far as pass rushers, you've got Matthew Judon, Von Miller, Joey Bosa, Josh Uche, who's a little bit younger. But all the names that I just mentioned, do the Packers take a swing on these guys, or do they just wait until the draft to address these potential needs?
Yeah, look, I understand Brian Gutekunst's thought process that it's a young man's game. I also think there's value in experience and guys that have done it. And all the names at wide receiver are basically different versions of Devonte Adams. And I would argue not in their as close to their prime as Devonte Adams still is. And he had no interest. I wrote on channel3000.com, the Packers never talked to Devonte, not even a cursory phone call to see if he might be interested to come back. So I think the wide receiver position, if there's going to be an addition, it's going to be a very inexpensive guy, or and most likely it's going to be in the draft in a mid round, a second day or third day pick. Pass rusher, look, I think Trey Hendrickson, who's available via trade from the Cincinnati Bengals, he has turned 30, and we know we don't like people who've had their 30th birthday in Green Bay, apparently. But he's the guy that makes the most sense to me. I think Matt LaFleur would love for him to be in this defense. I think Jeff Hafley, the defensive coordinator, he would fit really well. And I think he would elevate those other guys that maybe weren't as productive as they wanted him to be this year. So there's a lot that makes sense to a Trey Hendrickson trade, except of course I said everything that made sense about Devonte Adams, and that didn't happen. So I'm probably giving Trey Hendrickson the kiss of death.
We had touched on a couple guys that may not be returning: Josh Myers, Eric Stokes, Jair Alexander. But there were two guys that they do plan on bringing back. Brandon McManus seems as if the Packers have found their kicker, and then also Isaiah McDuffie. Uh, I want to get on McDuffie for a second. You have Edgerrin Cooper, second round pick from last year, who played well a lot of half of the season. Quay Walker, who's been uh, long range athletic linebacker for them the past 3 seasons. Why bring back McDuffie when you have maybe two young cornerstones within the middle of that defense already on the roster?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And again, I would say to you, having played the game, you understand that while you want big athletic playmakers, you also want reliable guys that you know are going to be where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. And that's Isaiah McDuffie. Now, they play a 4-3 scheme, but that means three linebackers are only out there when they're in their base defense. So more often than not, it is going to be Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper who are playing. But that's a tough position to stay healthy at. We saw that with Quay Walker missing time. We saw that with Edgerrin Cooper missing time. So Isaiah McDuffie knows this defense as well as anybody. He played in college for Jeff Hafley at Boston College. He knows the scheme. He's reliable. He's durable. He played through an ankle injury on a short week that the coaches never thought anyone could play through, and he did it. So those are the guys, as you know, those are the glue guys that keep your team together. And that's why he was a really smart and inexpensive safety blanket for them to sign. And when you talk about McManus, look, they tried the young kicker thing, right? They tried it twice, and both times it was frustrating. They finally found a guy that has experience. The guy kicked in Super Bowl 50, and their hope would be that he's kicking in Super Bowl 60 in a couple of months.
So Packers, they got their guard, they got their corner. Any other, maybe not so much big name free agents or well-known free agents that are on the market currently, but anybody in particular you think they may be targeting over the next few days?
Yeah, so what I think is interesting about where they're at as a team is that they only have 7 draft picks, and this will be Goody's 8th draft. And in the first 7, he had double digit picks in 4 out of the 7. So he wants more picks. If he doesn't get them, he has to use the free agent market to fill some of the holes in his roster. I don't think they're done in the secondary. Again, if there's a bargain type guy that's a pass rusher, that seems more likely than even a trade for Trey Hendrickson. And I don't think they're done on the offensive line. I still think, well, they feel pretty good about their front 6 in the on the depth chart. As we saw when Elton Jenkins left the game in Philly, Travis Glover and Kadeem Telfort were not ready for prime time. So if there's a veteran kind of journeyman type older guy, I like Kevin Zeitler, who's 35 years old, so he's very old by Goody's standards, but he's a Badger. He's from Waukesha, and more importantly, he started 16 games for the Lions last year, so he can still play. That's the kind of signing that it may not be in his comfort zone, but Brian Gutekunst should consider something like that.
Another player that they ended up losing, maybe one of the unsung heroes from last year, especially since Devontae Wyatt has not turned out to be exactly what we may have envisioned to be. Still have Kenny Clark, but again on the older side. Losing TJ Slayton. Do they try to replace him, or is there another young guy on the roster that may be able to fill his role?
Yeah, they need to replace him. Like, look, TJ Slayton had a knuckleheaded personal foul penalty against Philadelphia in the playoff game. It was costly. It kept the drive alive for that field goal. They chewed up a bunch of clock, but he's a good run stuffing player. He's not going to get you a lot of quarterback pressures, but we're talking about a run defense here that was 7th in the league in fewest yards per game allowed and 3rd in the league in fewest yards per attempt allowed. So that they were doing something right in the run defense. And while they may not have gotten pressure with their front 4 like you would like them to in the pass game, the run defense was solid, and TJ Slayton was a big part of that. So that is a piece. You put it perfectly. That he was an unsung player. That when you lose guys like that, you better figure out how you're going to fill that void. They do have Carl Brooks, who I think is a solid player. They do have Colby Wooden, who I think is ready to step in. But I don't think they were willing to pay the price it would have been to keep TJ Slayton. I think they do feel confident in those younger guys, but those guys have to prove that they can do it from a down to down basis.
Mhm. I know another, again, slightly older. I feel like this free agent market in particular, there's a lot of older veterans. I think that's a testament not only to how good those players are, but also just the advancement of technology over the past 15, 20 years. Guys are just able to play that much longer. So for me, I don't know if I'd be so hesitant to sign older players. This isn't 2000, it's 2025. But Javon Hargrave, he's another interior lineman that may be on the market pretty soon. I know there were rumblings of him maybe signing with Minnesota. Who knows? But that hasn't gone through yet. So to replace him, I don't know what his price tag would be, but I think that could be a good replacement of TJ if they wanted to go that route. Let's go back to pass rusher real quick. You talked about maybe going after like a cheaper journeyman, Leonard Floyd. Does that pique your interest at
Yep.
all?
Yeah, I saw him being released, and again, how willing are and I wrote about this too at the website. Like, how willing are you to step out of your comfort zone as a general manager when you said yourself that we have to ramp up the urgency? That's not just for the players. That's not just for Matt LaFleur and the coaching staff. That's for the GM too. And whether or not he's willing to sign some guys that maybe normally he wouldn't look, Leonard Floyd could help them, right? Now, I don't know what his price tag is going to be, but that's a guy that's got a proven track record. He is able to get after the quarterback. And, sometimes when you see yourself as a championship contender, which is what Brian Gutekunst said this team is ready to compete for championships. That's what he said. If that's how he feels, then sometimes you got to add guys that have been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, and have that experience that can help elevate the younger guys.
How much of an attractive recruiting piece is Jordan Love to the rest of the league? Everybody, a lot of guys they want to play on contenders, they want to play on teams with quarterbacks. Jordan Love, obviously might have taken a step back, mainly due to injury. Who knows? But he seems like one of those guys that people would be interested in playing with. Have you heard that he has been an advocate in trying to get more guys in, or what do you say?
Well, he tried to get Devontae Adams. Hold on a second. A lot of barking upstairs. Um, you know, Jordan Love did try to recruit Devontae Adams. It was him. It was Josh Jacobs. It was Keyshawn Nixon that were all kind of putting on the full court press. I know this. I know Josh Jacobs told us flat out one of the reasons he signed last year with this team was what he saw from Jordan Love. After they played the Raiders and he saw him in person, then he paid attention to the Packers the rest of the year. And he really thought that he's an ascending, really good young quarterback. That said, I do think this is a critical year for Jordan. Year 3 as a starter, Aaron Rodgers took his team to the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying that that has to be the bar, but you mentioned the injuries. Those were a factor in his play, but he's got to be more accurate. He's got to make more plays. He's got to take some fewer risks, right? He took a lot of risks early, and it was almost as if he didn't want to take any risks. He has to find that comfort zone, and he has to make that jump because if this team's going to be as good as they think it's capable of, the quarterback's the guy who's going to get them there.
All right, I think we've hit pretty much everything we could up until this point in the offseason. Anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
No, dude, this was great. So if there's, if you guys want more stuff like this, I enjoy chopping it up with you. So how long have you been out of school? What position did you play? Give me the lowdown.
I've been out of school going on 4 years now. Um, I played quarterback, so that was my thing.
Too much blame and too much credit, that
Yeah.
position, right?
So I played 3 seasons at Eastern Illinois University. Like many athletes these days, my last year I ended up transferring. Played 1 year down at Missouri Southern State, which is in Joplin, Missouri. Um, they're green and gold, so I got a taste of like Packer life in a way. But yeah, been in news now going on 4 years, and yeah, I enjoy it. Every once in a while, I get to do something vaguely sports related, and so this popped
So
up, and I
so
was
where are you from originally?
Chicagoland area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you grow up a Bears fan?
No. Mm-mm. I
Okay.
don't want to give it away, but no, I'm not a Bears fan.
All right. Come on, you gotta tell me, what were you?
I'm a Vikings fan.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So wait, all right, so you've been out 4 years, so you're what, like 26-ish?
Yeah. I'm 26.
Okay. So you were born when I was in like my 4th year covering the team. So as a Vikings fan,
Hmm.
you were probably 10, 11 when Favre was there, close to that.
Yeah, 10.
Um, what was that like? And I was just texting with Brian Burns while I was driving home. He's worried that the Vikings, because he's a Vikings fan too. He's worried that they're going to pick up Rodgers. Would you be against that?
No. Reason being is Kevin O'Connell has shown whoever's back there, he's going to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
I know everybody wants to point to Sam Darnold right now, but I look more to the 23 season when Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins went out there and played. Now I understand it didn't result to as many wins as they had liked, but Nick Mullins had multiple games at 300 yards passing. Josh Dobbs looked like he was going to earn himself a second contract with the team at one point. And these are guys that don't nearly have the amount of talent as a Sam Darnold, and we saw what that looked like, or an Aaron Rodgers, even at 41 years old. So if
Right.
they go with Rodgers, I wouldn't be against it. And then on top of all the signings that they're about to have, they've revamped the interior on the offensive line with, I don't know if it's Freeze or Fries, got Ryan Kelly.
Right.
Um, and then the defense, they're bulking up that middle as well, revamping the secondary. So I think this year's team will be better than last year's team. And I
Who
mean,
who did he? Who was the quarterback he started in that Packers game on New Year's Eve? Because he was like frustrated that Mullins threw too many picks, and he ended up going to Mullins in the second
here,
half.
Jaron Hall.
Yeah,
Jaron Hall.
I mean,
Yeah.
he lost the game as soon as he did that. Like, I know that Mullins turned the ball over a ton, but
Mhm.
you're right, he threw for a ton of yards. Like, if they were going to
Yeah,
have any chance in that game, he needed to start Mullins.
yeah. I understand, like as a coach, you gotta keep the locker room and hold people accountable, but that wasn't the time.
Right,
It was a Monday nighter, I want to say, or Sunday
right. It was
nighter, one of
prime
the two.
time. Right. Yep.
Yeah. And I was hopeful that Jaron was going to play well, but it it didn't work out that way. But minus Jaron Hall, everybody else that's been under center for Kevin
Right.
O'Connell since he's been there has played well. So if Aaron Rodgers wants to come over, then by all means, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let
I
him.
wonder. I wonder what McCarthy will be able to do. I've got some friends who cover the Vikings, and they said he looked really good from what they saw of him before the knee thing. So
Yeah, I'm not friends with JJ necessarily, but he's another Chicagoland kid. His Our high schools were in the same town, except he went to the Catholic high school in our town. So I've trained with him. Like I'm excited to see what he does. So
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched Michigan, they did not ask him to win a lot of games for them. Like,
Well,
they ran the ball really well, and
one thing that I will say is he's not doing anything at Michigan that Harbaugh isn't currently asking of Justin Herbert to do.
right, that's a good
So
point.
he's not necessarily asking Justin Herbert to go out there and win games. They run the ball a ton. They play defense, control the clock. They keep it moving. And Justin Herbert, outside of Andrew Luck, is by far and away the most talented quarterback Harbaugh has ever had, and he hasn't changed his philosophy.
Right?
So I don't think we should look at JJ and be like, oh, well, he didn't do X, Y, and Z at Michigan. He did what he was asked, and when he was required to throw, he lit it up.
Yeah,
22, the 22 rivalry game against Ohio State, lit up Ohio State, threw for like 300 yards, three TDs. Um, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of examples when they had asked him to throw the ball third and long because they weren't bullying people every single time. Third and long,
right.
and they need him to throw it. He completed it. So yeah, and most importantly, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hockenson, Aaron Jones.
Yeah,
Even if he's not the greatest, you don't need him to be the greatest. You just need him to get them the ball.
yeah, no doubt about that.